GM Growth Fam, time for another episode. And finally, I've been able to get somebody outside of our crypto bubble. So I'm glad that Kai, who's the head of startups at Framer, on the podcast today to talk everything AI product design and the future of it. Kai himself, I can describe this person as somebody who had an athletic background and took that journey to being, I think, one of the only tech bros that I know that is extremely athletic, personable, intelligent, strategic. I mean, the adjectives don't end. So, Kai, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
I appreciate that intro. I'm also not that athletic, so maybe we don't, at least relative to some of the people that I played with. But yeah, appreciate it.
No, definitely. So, I want to talk about that athletic piece because I feel like you're being too modest there. You started your career playing American football, and I'm going to call it American football because I have a lot of non-American audience as well. And what I'm really interested in knowing is you played at University of Texas, which is, I think, one of the premier colleges within American college football. And what I wanted to understand is from those early days of playing, right? And I see this in a lot of like people who were in their earlier career athletes. They take some principles, some learning, some discipline out of their early days and they sort of apply that to everything else that they do in their career. What was that for you?
Honestly, yeah, I think you like said it right there. Like discipline is the main thing. Honestly, like growing up for me wasn't like I was really fortunate. Grew up in a really nice area. Like never had any like problems growing up really. So going to Texas and playing football was a good amount of adversity, even though it's not really. And so like waking up at 5:30 every single morning when I really didn't want to, and like getting yelled at by coaches every single day, it was hard and it wasn't like easy, but I think I learned a lot, and honestly, it makes everything else after that pretty easy. Like I would tell people, I get to the office pretty early. I start working pretty early. And for me, it's just like, it's so easy because I used to wake up and run and lift at 6 in the morning. And now I just sit at a computer. So I'd say that's like the main thing. And then the other thing too is to like, I think football specifically, not just athletics, is like every little detail matters in football. Like you can make one mistake and that could cost you the game. And then that's the other great thing about football too, is everyone has a very unique job, but everyone needs to work together. Otherwise the team's not going to do well. And I think that was the big thing that the coaches tried to instill in us is like, hey, if you miss your meal, it might be a really small thing. Or if you don't clean up your locker, that's a really small thing, but it does matter, right? Like everything that you do matters, and how you do it. So it's like, I think they'd always say like, how you do anything is how you do everything. And it's really cliche, like coach talk, but definitely like helps a lot right now for sure, like later in life.
It's almost like you're getting the reps in, right? Where you have a routine and you sort of make a structure out of everything that you need to do within a working day and you sort of go towards it. I'm not much of an athlete at all, but I used to play football, soccer, sorry. And yeah, I completely relate to that point where like a lot of the learning is just having structure within your life because there's so many distractions, especially now, that you could spend hours and hours on. And that level of like having structure, having discipline, having a routine, and following it, getting the reps in every day is extremely important. Then your career started being a startup founder. You went to University of Texas. You were a football person, and you built a company around football analytics, which is a really interesting part where you've almost described Presnap, which was your company, as a Khan Academy of football, which is quite the parallel to draw in terms of like describing a product. And I love that. What I'm really interested in, this is something you've said before, is you wanted to build almost democratize the knowledge of this game of football, where you could be anywhere in America and you could have the same level of expertise as somebody who's in University of Texas. Walk me through why that motivation. What made you feel like out of all the things I could do, you could even continue to play football? Why did you decide to build Precept?
Well, one, I definitely couldn't have continued to play football. Unfortunately, I was not that good. But I think the biggest thing was it was me building something that I wish I had in high school. So, like for context, I grew up in Los Altos, which is right next to Sanford in the Bay Area. football's not a huge thing. My high school football program was really small, and I didn't start playing till my sophomore year, so it was really late to start learning things. And when I got to college, I learned so much, just like from a receiver standpoint, and so many little details that made such a huge difference in my game. And I was like, wow, like I if I knew some of this in high school, like I could have been so much better. And obviously that's like kind of wishful thinking too. Like, oh, I could have been better. But that was kind of my thing is like in Texas and Florida, Georgia, all these states in the South, like football is such a big deal. And the coaching is great because they have access to like these resources. These coaches work really hard. And my coaches work really hard too, but they weren't full-time coaches. You couldn't blame them. Like they didn't have the same resources as some of these coaches in the South. So kind of my idea was like, if you could democratize like some of these skills coaching, like in Texas, for example, at UT, they would do a high school coaching clinic for the college coaches would teach the high school coaches. And that's something they would do in the off season all the time. And the high school coaches would always ask the college coaches for like drill tapes, which is like how these drills are run in college. And so essentially like the first version of Presnap was kind of sharing those drills with everyone through the Presnap app. And that was drills and then kind of evolved into tape also, which was a lot of high school coaches will study college and NFL film for schemes that they run in their games and then kind of mimic those in their offenses and in their defenses. So yeah, it was really honestly building something that I wish I had and then kind of evolving into what it turned out to be. The audience was originally high school players and kind of evolved into more of high school coaches.
Yeah, that and I think that's such a powerful thing where you start with a passion for a game and you sort of evolve it from there to building pre-snap. And you actually built it with your teaching assistant in college, which I found
Yeah.
like that was an interesting deep cut. And you obviously you didn't continue to build Presnap. Walk me through what was your relationship like your with your co-founders? How did you meet them? How did you convince them
Yeah.
to work on this? And then also what I'm really interested in knowing is because you built your own startup and then you worked with startups, that's your day job. I'm really interested in knowing when you draw a parallel to your own co-founder relationship that you had in your early days, convincing them to come on, and then of course not working on a startup that you build over the years is a really hard decision to make. So what was that conversation like, and then how do you guide other founders to, you know, go in the right direction?
Yeah. So the way I met my first co-founder, Larkin, who was my CTO, was he was my TA in my creative coding class my sophomore year. And I was a sophomore college football player that had no interest in anything to do with coding at the time. Unfortunately, I wish I was more interested then because I love it now. But he is kind of the only reason I got an A in that class because I would go to his office hours and he would debug my project. And at the end, I kind of asked him like, "Hey, like I've been working on this, I've been designing it, and this was like I was using Adobe XD, which is hilarious to design it instead of Figma." And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So I started working with him. And then my other co-founder was my receivers coach at the time at Texas. Basically, I think after my sophomore year spring, I kind of went to the head coach and my receivers coach with like, "Hey, I've been working on this." And my receivers coach, Drew, was like, that's crazy. Like I've been thinking that this is something that needs to exist. And like I've been writing all this down. Let's do it." So we kind of like started out there and I started the company when I was in college. I would say not a lot happened. We came up with ideas and worked on them, but nothing like actually was taken to market until I graduated. Obviously, school, football, and running a company doesn't really work too well. So once I was full time, we were able to test a few different things and then finally found pretty solid product market fit through selling on socials, specifically Twitter, the first pre-snap app that we were kind of talking about. I think what was the other part of that question was
Yeah, when you had to wind down and not work
yeah,
on the
okay.
startup. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say right after college I moved to San Diego. I just wanted to live in Southern California. And after a couple of years there, finally moved to San Francisco. I was like, okay, like it's time to be serious now. Like let's move to San Francisco. And for those like 2 or 3 years after college, like pre-snap football, that was all I knew. Like I was very siloed. But then when I finally moved to San Francisco, I was like, man, like I kind of realized that what I've always wanted to build is in tech. And I've been siloed in football just because it's all I knew I started the company in college that was my life. And once I got to San Francisco, I was like, man, like I want to build something that's way bigger than just football. And because of that, I decided to stop working on Presnap and work at Vercel just because it was a really cool company that I love the branding, and so decided to move on.
So I know we were talking about this offline, but how did you end up at Worcester?
Yeah, so it's funny. I think most things in my life have ended up through cold DMs. I ended up actually playing football at Texas because I cold emailed the coach. But same thing at Vercel. I DM'd the VP of engineering, Lindsay, who's amazing. He also went to Texas, so that was kind of the connection. And I ended up making this was before V0 was even a chat interface. Use V0 and Cursor to build a site of like why they should hire me, pretty much. And I was a non-technical founder, right, and a designer. I wasn't a good enough designer to be a designer at Vercel, design engineer. So I was like, okay, I need to go the sales route. And then obviously I don't have any like corporate sales experience. So I had to kind of start out as an SDR. But yeah, so that's how I got to Vercel.
You know what I really love about the story is it almost feels like people say this, right? In retrospect, you can connect the dots, even though there was no real connection that you were building actively. It just sort of happened to go in the direction that it went into. And both Vercel and Framer, where you are right now, are software that you've used before in building your previous ventures or, even getting hired at Vercel. And I feel like you did it at a point where it was not cool to do it. Like, I know it's really cool to do it now, where people build their, like, do a video or build a Netflix portfolio style website of, yeah, okay, this is stuff I've done. You did it at a point it was not cool. So you might have started the trend. That might be on you.
I don't know about that.
But, you know, Vercel is a really interesting case study because it is, I think, one of the fastest growing AI startups and really kicked off the race in terms of building code through prompts. I think Vercel was one of the first webs to do it, definitely. What I'm really curious to know is because you're looking at it from a non technical perspective, but you obviously spent a lot of time talking to technical founders. You spend time talking to users. You were obviously, at the front lines doing sales with it. Walk me through, what do you feel like is the relationship now in an age where anyone could build anything? Doesn't matter if you're technical, non-technical. There are definitely levels to it, but pretty much if you had an idea of a software product, you could pretty much build it with AI without like zero coding experience, pretty much. That's the age we live in. So how do you see the relationship between users, designers, and coders? Like, where are the lines blurring? Where does the distinction really happen now? And especially from a sales perspective, for a lot of these companies, how are they looking at this? You know,
Yeah, I'd say there's like a couple. So one, on like a GTM side of things, like at Vercel, everyone uses V0 to kind of do whatever, which is crazy. Like on the sales side, there's plenty of AEs and SDRs that like spin up internal tools for themselves. I built a few internal tools with V0 and a couple other SDRs did also. And then a lot of the AEs will create decks in V0. So there's so many things that you can do on the go-to-market side, especially like I think internal tooling is so cool. I'm like, hey, I have this pain point. I need to build something. Let me just go to V0 and like I have this, let me create it. So that's awesome. But then from the like on the other side of that conversation of like when we're actually talking to customers too, the ones that really love V0 were using V0 in replace of PRDs. So they would just create V0 like prototypes and then send that instead of using a PRD. And then the other thing too is really for UX, right? Like it's great for being able to actually test a flow and get feedback instead of having to send a Figma file or like connect all of these screens together to test the user experience. And then I think the other, like the biggest thing that I heard startup founders using V04 is like live on calls, right? If you're like a forward deployed founder, you're talking to these customers on calls very early, like design partners, and they, hey, like I have an idea, I want this feature, and they're basically building it for them live on the call. through prompting. So those are kind of like the main things I would say I saw that were pretty cool. And then just like the way V0 is used internally, it was very similar to like how customers were using it with PRDs of like, hey, I had like, let's build this. And it's a V0 link, right?
Yeah, no, I think somebody from Google tweeted about the fact that we've stopped using written proposals where everything, if you want to recommend a feature, change, maybe a new product, even you spin up demos using these AI tools and you keep on doing that. What I find really interesting is how many non-technical people have started to do that, right? You said it yourselves where you were building prototypes or tools for yourselves to make your job as sales much easier. And I feel like a lot of founders right now are also almost overwhelmed with the fact that like, okay, I can do so much with AI and it's like they're looking for okay, where's the opportunity? Where's the risk? How much time should I really be dedicating towards building the product versus trying to sell the product? And then there's a whole different discussion of like being forward deployed within larger software companies and doing that. When obviously both with Vercel and with Framer, your job has been to talk to startup founders. So when they're talking to you and they're trying to understand like, okay, where are my opportunities? Where are my risks? What should I be focusing on? What do you tell them? What kind of conversation do you have with them?
Honestly, it's usually like very product specific of like Vercel was how can we help you with Vercel? Framer, same thing. Obviously, two very different kind of verticals. One is more infrastructure, and the other one is Framer. We're obviously very focused on how we can help with your marketing site and your brand look great, which is like I think uh, honestly half the battle of a startup. Not really, but it's just like punching above your weight and looking more serious than you really are to the outside world. And I think that's what Framer does a great job at. But yeah, I'd say most of the conversations are really around product of like, hey, this is how we can help you. And I think a good way to look at both of the products, Vercel and Framer, are there are large companies where there's an entire team dedicated to what this product does, right? So if you think of Vercel, there's DevOps teams at large companies that are I mean, not doing the exact same thing as Vercel. It's not completely replacing DevOps, but it's creating a level of abstraction for your team so you don't have to do that. And you can focus on building your product instead. Framer is the same thing. Your marketing side is something that's really important for your company. And you could spend a lot of time doing that yourself, or you could come to Framer and we'll take care of you. And basically, our product is an entire team for you as a startup to be able to use. So that's kind of like usually the conversation of like, instead of it's just another expense, it's this is what you're getting out of it. So you can focus on building your product, which is honestly the most important thing as a founder.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And like, I'm sure you get some pushback too, right? On a lot of different things. But I'm more curious to know, like, with AI features and just AI in general being table stakes, where okay, you're deploying it and putting it in absolutely anything and everything that you can put it in. Framer's actually been Framer and probably Figma to a certain extent as well. Didn't choose to deploy a lot of the AI features until they were absolutely certain, like, yes, this is needed, this is going to help, so on and so forth. When you're looking at the competitive landscape, almost right, I think it all boils down to it being accessible and it being inclusive, right? Where you're adding AI features because you feel like it's going to make your users' life easier. When you're having the same discussions with potential founders that are going to use Framer, especially on access and inclusivity, how does Framer position themselves like, hey, we don't have a lot of AI features, but really we're the solution that you should be using to build out your landing pages, your website, so on and so forth. How do you handle that friction?
Yeah, I'd say Framer specifically, the AI tools are around. It's very different from like Lovable or V0, where you're spinning something up end to end with prompts. Framer, kind of the idea is like, hey, let's use AI to help you get started to do the monotonous tasks of like scaffolding up a website or creating a component that you know you want to make and using AI for that. And then keeping the design in the hands of the designers. That's
Yeah.
probably like the most basic explanation, I'd
Yeah,
say.
no, but it makes sense also, right? And we were talking about this offline as well, but I think it's the homogeneity of AI design where everything looks the exact same. It's funny, like I've been looking at YC startups that were in the summer batch. When you look at the first version of their website, it's always going to be like something like Lovable or Claude or like Cursor that they might have used to build that website. And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, it's like a Framer template or something similar where it just doesn't look like every other website that you'll end up on. And I feel like from a design perspective, it is so critical. Where I think Cluely is the best example. I know we spoke about it offline as well, where they claim to have spent 100K on designing their website, essentially, and how big of a part that plays in terms of differentiating yourselves as brand so that you don't end up getting mixed in the noise of new AI startups that come out almost daily, pretty much. So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I was curious to know though, especially now when developing great websites, I mean, I'm sure it's only going to get easier and easier and easier. And there's discussion of, especially for programmers or designers, where the focus has gone from being able to make products to rather it's shifting to curating products where yeah, like a lot of the, let's say, busy work or the grunt work that you had to do building a great website or building a great product is now outsourced to AI and you're really just curating it in the right way, in the right direction. How do you feel like, because, you've seen the spectrum over the years, I'm curious to know, like, how do you look at this change happening? Or do you even feel like that is something that is going to happen at a large level, or is it just what I like to call a Silicon Valley exaggeration?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a little bit of that. I think anytime I like get out of that San Francisco bubble a little bit and I talk to someone, they're like, I need help building a website. And I'm like, wait a minute. You don't know you could just do this in like 2 minutes? So that's definitely the me in the San Francisco bubble. But you also forget that a large amount, like large part of the world doesn't know that they can just easily create websites still. But I would say I think it's always been this way, but it's probably even more now because it's easier. Is like for me, at least, just very personally, like when I look at a startup's website, even if they are not as legit as another one that has a vibe coded site, I take them much more seriously when I look at their website and it's very like it has a great brand and it's clearly like thought out. And I think that's just like that's the differentiation of like standing out. There's different ways to stand out with your product through marketing and just having a great product in general, but also like your branding too. And I think all of them are important. I don't think one of them is more important than the other, but I think that like you said, like when it is easier to create things, the ones that look better are going to stand out more. Or yeah,
It's also like there's this balance almost of you want to get things out as fast as possible because that's what your VCs are telling you or your potential investors are telling you, like get the product out in the hands of as many people as possible. But you also have to be careful with how is it going to look to people. And I feel like with AI, it's exactly like you said, right? It's almost the people who are spending a little bit more time on developing something truly exceptional are going to, if you're, especially when you're competing with a new product every day, pretty much that's your only differentiating factor, right? That's the way you're going to survive. And that goes back to the homogenizing of design where everything looks the same. So definitely that makes a lot of sense. One thing, especially from a framer perspective, when you're talking to not just, I think I'll shift from founders to actually freelancers, designers, agencies, we're still extremely loyal to Framer because I feel like it's almost got like a community component
yeah,
of where you have ingrained brand loyalty, even though okay, something else might be slightly easier to use, but you've almost ingrained yourselves in the Framer community. I mean, heck, there are literally subreddits on like, okay, what components are the best, like what templates you should be using, so on and so forth. How are you playing into that? Like, I'm curious to know, like, are you aware of it? Are you actively capitalizing on it? I'm curious to know what your opinion is.
yeah. I'd say Framer's product market fit with designers and agencies and freelancers is like definitely the strongest. And it makes sense, right? Like I think every agency I've talked to is like we like Framer because we can just move fast. And when we talk to startups, some of them prefer custom code, and that's just because that's the medium that they're used to. But agencies prefer to be in Framer, or experts prefer to be in Framer. And sorry, we refer to Framer for like top freelancers as Framer experts. Um, and but yes, I think that's kind of like the big thing is it makes it really easy for them to move fast. But yeah, I don't know. Sorry, does that answer that question?
Yeah, no, I think it all goes back to where you are adjusting yourselves to a different audience, right? You're going to have a different conversation with founders, and all founders care about is I want to move fast. I want this done as soon as possible. And where designers are way more, I would say lazy is a wrong word, but they like to move slower because they want to be more intentioned about their design. And I think especially now with a lot of brands, and I'm sure this is a conversation that's going to happen. A lot of brands are going to do a rebranding, making their website from the ground up, making their logo from the ground up, reframing their socials, their visual language, so on and so forth. And a lot of them are going to struggle because really at the core of it, they have oriented themselves towards, yeah, we're going to outsource to AI, right? Like that, it's going to figure it out. It's going to make it look good. But reliance on that is actually going to be detrimental to them as things go by. And especially when you're literally what I like to call like competing for crumbs because there's something new every single day. That's really going to be your only factor that's going to completely set you apart. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, let me take a step back and go into some controversial Silicon Valley takes. I know you've grown up there, you have a lot of friends there, you live there. But from the east side of the world, I have a few contentions with some of the predictions that come out of the valley almost every day these days. Is the one person unicorn is something I've heard again and again and again and again, where the thesis is, okay, you can pretty much do everything through AI agents and you don't really need human beings. And voila, a person builds $1 billion company. Um, I honestly just want to know your like opinions on it, your takes on it. Like, do you feel like it's possible? Because I don't know. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this.
Honestly, my like very personal take is that is like a huge thing that's just overblown on Twitter. But that's also me just being like kind of a purist of like, man, like it's so fun to build something with a team of like just I love seeing people just like a close team just building something that's like they're just on their MacBooks and they're gonna build something that millions of people use. And something about just like saying, oh, hey, that's not doesn't have to be a thing anymore. Like it could just be one person. And I'm sure it could be one person. But honestly, my opinion is just like it's such a cool thing to see small teams do things that like big companies weren't able to do. And I also think too, like, yes, you can have a bunch of agents go do different things, but I think the one thing for sure is marketing and sales. It's like very personable and like kind of, I think it depends on how you're building your business, right? Is it a product led growth strategy? Is it a cold outbound, which it feels pretty rare now to be purely cold outbound and no, I mean, that's one way to get started for sure. Everyone does that. But I think it's hard to be shipping fast all the time and also doing two things. I think it helps a lot if you're a, technical founder and can do both. Yeah, I think that to me, I think in summary, the one person founder thing is a huge Twitter thing for sure.
Because it sounds cool, right? It's like
Yeah.
I like to draw the parallel to drop shipping, although that's a really bad one. But I mean, when you're talking about exaggeration and almost trying to sell a narrative of, yeah, it's going to be amazing and AI can do anything and everything. Because right now, AI seems like magic where you add AI to anything and it's going to be amazing. And I am and that's why I have huge respect for a lot of traditional SaaS businesses that haven't like completely jumped on the AI bandwagon the moment a new update comes out or they have the capability to do so. You look at Figma, it was able to IPO without AI, right? And obviously did amazing. I put Framer in a similar bucket and some of the other like traditional SaaS businesses, and there is something that people don't even talk about. We were talking about this offline, which is the cost of AI. Right now, it's all subsidized. So it feels amazing and you feel like you can do anything and you can be Superman. In reality, it's probably not going to be the case. Another hot take from the Valley is forward deployed engineers. YC loves to talk about forward deployed engineers because they're obsessed with technical founders, and rightfully so. I mean, if you're building a tech product, you probably want a technical founder to be leading that company. I do have beef with that, especially now, because I feel like, especially at a base level, there are a lot of products you can build with AI now. May not be as great as what a technical founder could do, but we could probably get there. Forward deployed engineers, the thesis is every engineer is going to be talking to customers directly and building products around customer needs almost instantaneously using AI. Somebody who's done sales, what do you think about that? Because most of the engineers I know absolutely despise talking to people because they love coding.
Yeah. I think that the like forward deployed engineer strategy is great, like very early on. This is also just like my like very personal opinion. Like it's great early on, but and like finding product market fit because even if you're building for yourself, at the end of the day, like not everyone thinks like you. So you're gonna have to talk to customers and you're gonna have to kind of build for you could start solving a problem for yourself, but you're gonna still have to build for everyone, right? So like that strategy of going in and building specifically for and like each business, if you're building B2B SaaS, like each business has different requirements, especially in sales. So I think it's like very necessary, but I don't think it's something that's like at a certain scale, once you kind of have a problem that you're solving and you have a product kind of ironed out, then to take it to the next level, I think like now we're seeing like product led growth is just like clearly the biggest thing. And I think also with like LLMs, like surfacing different products, I think it's even bigger, right? I mean, like people, I remember when I was working at Vercel, like so many of our inbound contact sales would come from ChatGPT queries. So like that kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's starting, right? Like product led growth is already a big thing with socials. We get bigger with LLMs. So I think that's kind of like there's definitely a lot of hype because it's great at the beginning, but I think when it's time to scale, then it's time to move to something like product led growth, especially with LLMs becoming bigger and everyone's like product finding journey.
Yeah, I think it's more of a culmination of roles where you have a new type of role where you are an engineer, but you're also doing sales because product development has gotten much faster than building a proposal, sending it out to a company and going through the motions of that. And I also feel like to a certain extent, sales cycles also get much smaller now, which is a great thing for especially somebody who has done SaaS sales. I know it's a pain in the butt to spend like 6 months going back and forth with a potential enterprise client and making sure that you have everything to where, okay, you have a need for a feature or something that needs to be changed, edited, morphed, and now you have an engineer on call because they're forwardly deployed and they can directly talk to a client and get it done. Oh, my concern more comes from the fact that somebody doesn't like to do it, is it going to be like mandatory for every engineer to be forwardly deployed? But yeah, you're right.
That's a
Especially,
good question. I
yeah,
realized it didn't really answer your question. I think it's more of the opposite of like if every engineer, I mean, to be honest with you, I think if you're an engineer, you're going to want to focus. It's really hard to like get into your flow state and then hop on a call and then get back into your flow state. You want to stay in that. I think everybody could agree that like it makes sense for engineers to stay in their flow state. And I think it might be more of the opposite where sales, traditionally non-technical salespeople can contribute to the product more, especially because if they're like hearing the same feedback and they can kind of do what a lot of founders already do right now, which is prototype new features on calls. And I think that's something I see more of than engineers being involved more in the sales cycle, but more of they're getting this feedback directly. And instead of just like, hey, by the way, we've been asked for this feature like 10 times, it's like, hey, well, this is what we prototyped on the call with them. Like, and then you're passing that off to engineering and design, right? To actually in product to build it instead of just like, by the way, they asked for this. And it's like, okay, cool. What are we gonna do with that?
yeah. And I think it also, do you feel like as a non-technical founder, if like you were building out a product, because I've done this and I feel like it works really great, especially from like a PR perspective. And when you're trying to describe as a non-technical person to a technical person what really needs to be built. or what needs to be executed on. If you are using Claude or Cursor or Vercel, you can actually directly give them code. Like, hey, here's your baseline. This is what I
Right.
started with. And now, do your thing, and scale it from there. And I think that's why I feel like what is technical and what is non-technical, isn't it? Like if you can
Yeah.
build a working product using AI and it's a tech product and it's scaling and it's making money, are you really a non-technical founder at that point? Like, where's the line now?
Say so actually for me, one of my biggest regrets was being a non-technical founder. And it's actually something that like ever since I started working at Vercel, I started learning on my own. And obviously it's a lot easier to learn with AI. But I think as a founder, like there's two ways of thinking if you're non-technical. One is like I can just build this with like Lovable or V0. I don't need to learn. And then the other is, hey, I want to really build this, but I also want to understand how it works. And you can do that now because you have Cursor, you have Claude, ChatGPT, right? Claude Code. And if you use those tools correctly, you can learn what the code is doing and not just like sit there and pray that this thing doesn't break. So I think that there's two ways of going about it. And then the other thing is like, if you're a founder and you really want to make this thing work, like you should probably learn how it works, at least from like learn about all of kind of the basics. So I think there is a line of like who's technical and who's not. And that's less of like who can actually build the thing, but more of like who understands the system and like how it works, how it scales, and those kind of things. Because you're right, like technically anyone can build a prototype now. Most likely. There's some exceptions, but it's also like, are you going to build something that scales theoretically, probably breaks, might expose some API keys and some other stuff along the way? Yeah, I think probably the where that line is crossed is definitely the understanding of like systems design, I feel like.
So every class in the future is going to be more focused on systems design and DevOps rather than just plainly learning programming, because a lot of that gets outsourced to AI, and really that should be your major focus. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I feel like probably a lot of VCs and people who really birth the startup ecosystem, I'm sure you're probably experiencing that as well, where a non-technical founder, because they built an AI prototype, and sometimes if you're really a hustler and you're really ingrained in your product, sometimes you're just going to go and learn some bit of coding. Like, because you're so frustrated that AI is not able to build something and you want to understand code. So you go out and try to do that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, finally now, let me go back to your roots a little bit and ask you, if you were building a startup now and you were building lean, you didn't want a huge bloated team, you had to start all over again. What would you do? What would you focus on, especially from a skills perspective? As a like sophomore in college, what would you focus on learning, doing, and really understanding more to be able to be a successful founder going forward?
Well, I think it depends. Like the main question is like, are you building a SaaS business or like a software company, which you probably are, just because that's most startups. And if you are, I would learn to be technical. Like I would learn how to code. And I feel like that might be the opposite advice, but I think at the end of the day, like if you want to be the most productive, you should be able to build it yourself. And this is like me learning this firsthand the hard way of like, I wasn't able to do that. And that was the most frustrating thing for me because, at the end of the day, the most important thing is building your product. And if you can't do that yourself, you're going to be slower than your competition. So I'd say that's the biggest thing for sure is like being able to have an idea. And that's the coolest thing about software too, right? Like being able to have an idea and then ship the feature the next day. Like it's so the speed of iteration is so cool. But I think that's like the big thing is building it yourself. And then the second thing is understanding how you can put it in front of people and get them to use it. And I think some people like expect to build something, post it on Twitter, post it on a product ton, and it goes crazy. But really, like when you think about sales, the reason sales exists is like I think the store for me, like when it clicked in my head of like what sales is was when I was going to a gym that was close to my house and it was much cheaper, but there was a gym that's much nicer by my office. And I was like, you know what? It was like double the price. And I was like, I'm probably not going to go, but I'll check it out. And I signed up for a free tour, and the gym called me, emailed me, and texted me. And when they called me, I picked up and I was like, you know what? I'll go in. And then once I went in, I realized I was like, this is so much better for me. I'm going to save so much time. This is such a like a much better gym. Like this is I need this. Like this is way better. But they had to kind of push me to do that, right? They had to convince me to get that. So I think that's what sales is like understanding that hey, there's people out there that need your solution. It's your solution is probably going to make their life better, but also humans are busy. Like people have stuff going on. So they need your help to kind of push you. Obviously, there's different ways. Like if your product doesn't actually help them, you're just being annoying. But and there's different ways to like get to people through that, right? There's cold outbound, which is great at the beginning if it's small and you're targeting the right people. But then you can do the same thing, that same concept of like reminding people and pushing people through socials by creating content around your product and showing people how it works. Because more often than not, like someone could sign up and they'll forget about your product and they'll never come back, but they might still have that pain point. And so if you're creating content all the time of like how your product works, what it does, and they keep seeing that and they keep seeing it pop up on their feed, you're basically pushing them towards coming back or signing up. So I would say those are the two main things. Is like build the product yourself and then understand what sales is and how you can do it at a small scale. And then also like effectively reaching people, whether that's social media or like through personally, I would double down on social media. And that's also like me coming from, that's where we gained all of our customers for Presnap was through Twitter and TikTok and Instagram. So yeah.
Isn't it interesting that even though we have progressed to a stage where practically 90 to 95% of code is AI, and we feel like it's going to disrupt so many things, but the fundamentals never change. It's like you still have to have, like, you still need to do social media, you still need to build a great brand, great website, talk to your users, customers, do sales. It's like, it's funny because you think technology changes a lot of things. And what I love to say is like it's only an evolution rather than a revolution, where you're just going to do the same thing in a slightly different way, and it's going to become easier for you to do it, but you still have to do it. Like there's no replacement, I feel, and which is so interesting, right? Because like there's no replacement to a conversation like this. Like I can never imagine like a Kai sitting down with an AI and talking the way we're talking right now. There's never going to be a replacement for this. Interestingly enough, 9% of the business, no matter what scale you do it at, is two human beings talking to each other. It's never going to be that. So yeah, I think that's an amazing sort of cliff to end on. But I have one final question for you: is say you could build a dream product, anything that you want to build, what would it be? And second, if you could get anybody in the world to be your co-founder, who would that be?
I'd say in terms of like what I would want to build, I think that AI is the best aid for user experience in terms of like ChatGPT is probably the highest level of abstraction we've ever seen in terms of computing, right? It's simple. I want this, you get this back. And when we talk about like UI was created to make it easier for you to tell the computer what you want back. And now we have simple text to response like and it's going to get better over time. And I think kind of leaning into that of like UI is great. I'm a huge fan of great user experience like UI, like I love that stuff, but I also think that the best UI is probably no UI, and that's maybe somewhere close. I think it really depends on what you want to do, but I think something around that of like hey, it's such a high level of abstraction where like I can tell whatever this is that I want and get that back. And I don't have to go type on a screen. I don't have to go navigate to an app and open it and scroll and do all of those things. To me, that's like super exciting and really cool because I love UI and I think it's great. And I love looking at great designs, but I think that being able to tell the computer what you want, get back something is huge. Co-founder, and I honestly don't even know, but I would say like, honestly, probably just like a good friend. I think that's like the biggest thing is like one of my good friends being able to like build something and just have fun. Like at the end of the day, like that's why you're doing it, right? As a founder, like hopefully it's because it's gonna be tough, but at least you're gonna have fun while you do it. So yeah, I'd say probably one of my friends.
That is such a like a founder response of like, yeah, because obviously you've done it, so you know like how hard it is. Because like I feel like if I had asked the same question to a non-founder, they'd probably be like, yeah, I would love to get like Steve Wozniak as my co-founder and build something in I don't know, marketing or something. But yeah, I love that answer. And Kai, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
No, I appreciate you having me. It was great.
Awesome. To everyone who tuned in, see you in the next episode. GM, and bye bye.